Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Process Podcast.
Mr. Younger,
Edward Haynes.
how you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
Good, thank you. How's your day been?
It's been quite a long day, actually. This week's been, obviously, with the changes that we've been going through. The week's been, it's Wednesday, and we've been hustling already, which is feeling pretty beat up, ready for the summer throwdown.
I mean, we've been chatting about these changes on this podcast the last few weeks.
Yeah.
We are now day 3
Yeah?
since launching it, and everyone's dropping like flies.
Well, it's just a change of schedule. It's not that we're dropping like flies. It's just there's different things going on, and we're all excited to be doing it as well. So we're all jumping into tasks and stuff. But I think we'll definitely, next week, the week after, we'll hit a bit more of a steady state, which I think's a good thing.
I did notice, though, people are 3 days in hitting a bit of a lull already. Like, we had half the amount of team on the training floor today.
Just not built the same, lad.
Liam's broken his ankle.
Yeah, that was an excuse, though.
Yeah. Tammy's off home sleeping. Karan took a day off.
I think the pressure of the leaderboard as well for the summer throwdown, I think, is getting to people as well.
You reckon?
Especially, yeah.
The fact that Liam had to break his ankle to not do the throwdown is like, that just shows. Yeah. It just shows the pressure.
You're in his head.
And not everyone can handle it.
Yeah, it's true. Some people crack. Some people turn out to be diamonds, mate, and that's
By the way, folks, Liam didn't really break his ankle, but he was carrying some dumbbells for a client and did try to run off a step, doing a farmer's carry, and ended up twisting and falling on the floor yesterday. But he's okay.
That's what happens when you grow up not playing sports.
Yeah, he twisted his ankle and he was requesting crutches today. And he used them for about 3 minutes, and now he's walking completely fine. And then he's asked for cover for his classes. Liam, if you're listening, we just think you're a bit soft, mate. That's all.
We love you.
We do love you, but you're still soft. Al, why have you got pink glasses on?
Just to stop the blue light, you know.
You know those aren't blue light blockers.
Yeah, but they look cool.
I mean, we have just got out of an hour and a half of recording. We've been recording for the Summer Throwdown, which is, by the time this episode comes out, we will be, I think, in week 2 or week 3 of the Summer Throwdown. But basically, announcing all the workouts, we've been putting a lot of effort into Throwdown. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I think it's the most structure we've had leading up to one of our throwdowns that we've done for a while, whether that's the involvement with Spruce and the graphic design stuff and the scorecards. We've never really had the back end house of stuff done as well as this. So I think I'm excited for this one to.
But I think another thing is that, you know, with this restructuring of the team, you know, one of your jobs now is to be, you know, working with Izzy, our general manager, to run world-class events. Yeah. And that's actually something that's, you know, in your jurisdiction as your job responsibility. Yeah. And we've never had someone who's, you know, one of their job responsibilities has been to, you know, look at events calendar, plan an events calendar, and execute high-quality events. Yeah.
It's always been just like a side job, or like a sub-thought to the day of coaching or the day of whatever you're doing. Whereas now we can dictate a little bit more and give yourself that time to be able to execute those events to the standard that we want to.
Can I just ask, like, what made you gravitate towards events? I know you've got a little side gig Sundays, and you love food, you love cooking, you love entertaining, and this is something that, you know, you and Izzy have formed a pretty good team on, and are doing events quite regularly. Like, what's brought you to the event space, and what do you love about it?
I think even if we rewind, the reason why I got involved with CrossFit, it's freezing, lad. The reason why I got involved with CrossFit was the community aspect, was the group style of people. And I think for me, it's just been a natural transition to try to bring people together in the name of having a good time, or the name of getting fitter together, or whatever the purpose of bringing people together is. The joy that brings me is just something that, like, it inherently fires me up, which is something I've only really explored this year. I don't know why it's been just this year, but, like, definitely Sundays helped me realize that it's something that I want to be doing, which is then why this job role that I'm moving into is perfect for me right now.
I mean, I think even as me, as, you know, the owner of the business, is that I was never really thinking about what jobs, what skill set does this team have, maybe outside of just coaching the hour. Yeah. And something we've been exploring really recently as a management team is, like, you know, how can we have people doing things they love and that they're really good at? And, you know, that's essentially what this whole restructuring of the business has been about, is, you know, we got so much talent within this coaching team, inside of coaching and outside of coaching. And now, like, how can we actually make this a part of their jobs, and how can that benefit the organization and the mission, and as well as, like, you know, benefit the person? So I think big changes in the company as well has probably also helped you actually realize that this is something you really want to do.
For sure. Yeah, massively.
Today we are talking about kind of our training stories. I think when I say our, I'd like to actually just interview you, learn more about your training story. I talk about my history. I've bored our podcast listeners endlessly talking about how I got into training and how it got me to where I am today. But I know we were having a chat just as we were training today, and just talking about yesterday we had a bit of a brainstorm about, you know, our live, perform, compete and elite training tracks, and kind of talking about what we think makes us unique and the things that we love about our group program that we offer online, but also the group programs that we run in our affiliates. And then we kind of started reminiscing about our stories, and like our stories in individual coaching, where we hired coaches ourselves, but then also like the different blogs and programs we used to follow, and kind of like where that's all how that's all funneled into being where we are now. And both of us follow, you know, essentially the compete program. And we all train together as a team. So I'd love to kind of just do a big old rewind to where kind of it all started for you. So let's talk. I know I would say probably university is where the training stuff really started with CrossFit, but perhaps does it even start before that?
Before, yeah. So my best mate growing up was Jordan Wallace, who owns Reebok CrossFit Tyneside. There was a bit of a weird backstory with that, but he got Reebok CrossFit Tyneside given to him, or he bought it when he was about 17.
What year is this?
I mean, he's 1 year older than me, so I was 16 at the time. I'm 30 next year, so do the math on that
14
one.
years, so that's 2008. So that's early days.
Early days of CrossFit.
Early days of CrossFit.
It didn't. The landscape for CrossFit was very different back then.
That's the first CrossFit Games.
Yeah,
was 2008.
Kalipa.
Yeah. Kalipa out of nowhere.
Yeah,
every second counts. Every second counts.
What a great document. Yeah.
We used in our old coastal. We used to have that screen in front of the lifts.
Yeah,
we would literally just have every second count on replay every day.
So good. I do miss those days. To be fair.
Can I ask though, like, how did Jordan in 2008? You know, you got the very first CrossFit Games. Like, how did he get into CrossFit?
So he used to do like marathon runs, and he basically picked up so many injuries.
That was his sport.
That was his sport. He was like super skinny, crazy marathon runs. Always been a really good runner, but the kind of process he went through is he picked up a few injuries, and they said, "Look, why don't you come down to CrossFit and have a blast with this?"
Who said?
The old owner of Reebok the old owner of CrossFit Tyneside.
Oh, so the CrossFit Tyneside was already an affiliate.
Yeah.
So it must have been
one of the first. It was the first in the north. The north of England, which is why then when he got the chance to get it, it was like, we need to push to try to get this, because there was CrossFit Tyneside, CrossFit Teesside, there was a couple of others, but the northern half of England, there wasn't many good CrossFit gyms. So I was 15, 16 when me and Jordan have always been good friends. I was playing rugby, he was doing his marathons, and he basically turned around and said, "Look, do you want to come down and do instead of doing pre-season with the rugby team, come down and do pre-season with me?" I actually did my work experience for sixth form with Jordan. Did absolutely nothing apart from trained.
So he was 1 year out of school. He was owning this gym now. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty. He's got a pretty cool story in terms of like, and then where he's at right now as well is really cool. But and then just from that point, kind of really, rugby went on the back pedal. And I started training more, got more involved with the CrossFit scene, did a few little competitions, was known as like the young kid on the block, or like Jordan's apprentice for years. And then that just kind of slowly grew with the sport, and especially the landscape of the sport. When I first got into it, it was very like gym rat, like tire flips and do as much random shit as you can.
Yeah,
and
love that stuff.
I slowly started to see it become a sport, because I'd say it was like 2008, 2009, 2010 were my first years in CrossFit. And then at that point, it was really starting to grow into the sport that we see now. And I thought, you know what, I'm decent at rugby, but I'm not the best. But I was already at that point pretty successful on the CrossFit scene in the UK.
Can I just pause you? And I just want to rewind a bit to that. To you first, you know, spending that summer, or, you know, doing the apprenticeship at Jordan's gym.
Yeah.
And you that pre-season, you said, so instead of doing rugby pre-season, you trained in the gym. What did your training look like that pre-season? And were you doing it specifically to get good at rugby, Or was it just you were just doing CrossFit as to what you thought CrossFit was at that time?
It was the second part. I definitely, I've always been fit, so it's not like I really had to do a pre-season. It's not like I got out of shape in the off-season. So I was already in pretty good nick by the time the season started.
What would your normal training look like? At the age of what age are you now? 16, 17 at that point?
Yeah. Train in the morning, eat paleo.
Like. But would you be like, before CrossFit, what training were you doing?
So before CrossFit, we'd do like your standard rugby stuff. So we had a gym at the rugby club, which would be like you'd be doing bench press, power cleans without a hook grip. Like we'd even do tie flips, to be fair, at the gym at the rugby club. And I think I've always just enjoyed strength training, and I think that was like my first love was strength training itself, and then that slowly started to mold into CrossFit, which is what we see now.
Okay, cool. So we'll continue with the story now.
Yeah.
So you do pre-season at Jordan's.
Yeah.
And you're just doing, I guess, a bunch of random CrossFit. What's it looking like at that point in time?
At that point in time, so CrossFit was like very randomized. It's not like what you see right now in terms of the tests for CrossFit, like the Open. We know what's coming out. This was like back in the day where they could literally tell you to do anything and you would do it. And it was back when people would still follow CrossFit.com, which was 3 days on, 1 day off. So your rest days would just be randomly situated throughout the week. You'd be like resting on a Saturday, resting on a Monday. It was all over. But in terms of the structure of training, we tend to do a workout in the morning. We'd have lunch, and then we'd have strength training in the afternoon, and then another workout.
Savage. Even at the age, that was the age
of
16,
I mean, like
17.
17-ish age was like when I was training a little bit harder, and then I went off to university, and then I slowly accumulated a garage gym, illegally training people on my driveway, got into a load of shit with neighbours complaining about playing screamo music and techno music at 6 a.m. in the morning on an assault bike. But
Papa Roach on repeat.
Yeah, exactly. The old CrossFit tunes.
Yes.
But yeah, just slowly accumulated a garage gym. And I would say university was where I went from being a CrossFitter and loved the CrossFit scene into being a competitive CrossFitter, or that was now my full-time like scope of what I wanted to do.
So when you were at uni, were you doing CrossFit comps?
Yeah.
Were there loads in the UK at that time?
There was a few. So you had like the Battle of London. There was a few within the season that I would prioritize that I wanted to do. The Athlete Games, Battle of London. There was a few other competitions.
So cool that you're doing that at uni.
And like, I'd say the first year of uni, I was a proper uni student. I went out and got drunk and did all the stuff. But my second and third year, I was like a bit of a recluse. I didn't really do much. And I was very much head down. And my main goal was to make regionals. That's all I wanted.
Was there anyone else at your uni who were also CrossFitting?
I slowly, over the 3 years, like slowly started to like create like this little bit of a cult that came down to the garage and we'd all throw down together. But actually in the gym, I got kicked out of York St. John's University gym for doing CrossFit. So big F you to York St. John's.
Interesting. What do they say? Is it because you were just blowing smoke, chalk everywhere and hanging out rings on a squat rack?
I also just think they were teaching S&C. Like that was a big part of what the York St. John did. They had a big S&C program, and then you had this fucking weirdo doing kip and pull-ups and trying to snatch in the gym, like wearing leggings and board shorts. Like, who is this weirdo? And got kicked out from doing that, and then was just like, you know what? Next year I'm just gonna buy a barbell and plates. And then as I started to train people, I would just next month I'd buy a kettlebell. The month after I'd buy a wall ball. Like, as I accumulated enough money to be able to sort this. And at the end of uni, I had an assault bike, handstand push-up mats, lifting platform, 4 or 5 kettlebells, dumbbells. I could back squat 170 with enough weight. So I had a good little pull-up bar. I had a good little gym going on.
That's awesome. And what was your programming at that point in time? So what were you doing for your own programming?
So Jordan programmed for me. So Warrior programming.
Was it called Warrior programming back then?
That was I don't think so. I think that was the earlier iteration of that. But Warrior programming was then what I moved into, which is it was savage. It was a lot.
Give us some snippets.
There was that time in CrossFit where like volume was seen as the answer to everything.
Well, it's like no one knew what the threshold was. Yeah. No one knew that it could potentially be bad to be doing all this.
Yeah.
People were like, oh my God, the human body's capable of doing so much more than we all thought, and then a year later everyone was fucked.
Yeah, and especially for myself, I mean, being a relatively resilient person, like I can put up with quite a lot. So I did that program for 3 years, but it was a lot.
Talk us through like what are some of the good memories of good old warrior programming.
So I remember doing Helen, which is the run.
Overhead squat.
The
kettlebell
swing pull up.
Yeah.
I remember doing that every 10 minutes for an hour.
Nice.
6 back-to-back Helens. But at the time, that's what everybody was doing. You followed Fronin.com or whatever it was at the time. It was Murph, Fran, Helen, max out your deadlift. It was very, very different styles of programming to what we're at right now.
Like, were you getting injured? Were you getting burnt out? Were you thriving? Were you feeling good?
Yeah, it was like, I think now actually, when I look back, I definitely wasn't thriving. I was eating paleo, which we all know is like, if you're trying to be an elite athlete, is not a great way to sustain yourself.
Especially how we all did paleo, which is basically like essentially very low carb.
Yeah.
Because paleo doesn't necessarily have to be low carb, but that's our interpretation of it.
I would have 4 steaks and a piece of broccoli.
Yeah. Quarter of sweet potato.
Super shredded though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think actually when I look back, I actually think I don't want to say I've got mental problems, but I think a lot of like I would hide behind training quite a lot and bury myself in training, like rather than actually speaking to people about how I felt. I just turn the music up in the gym and full send on 4 different workouts. And I think I used it as almost a bit of an escape versus actually having a healthy relationship with training. So I think definitely through my years in uni, the last couple of years at uni, going over to Kuwait, and the first couple of years in Kuwait, the whole time I was in Kuwait, I definitely used training as an outlet to hide versus understanding and growing within myself, which I think then led to a relatively unhealthy approach to training and an unhealthy addiction to training, I guess, I would say.
So tell me about that kind of hiding behind training. Like what was training allowing you to hide from?
Well, it's just hard to be like a good person. It's hard to be a good boyfriend. It's hard to be a good coach. It's hard to be a good anything if your main focus and your sole focus is to go to the gym at 9 a.m. and absolutely destroy yourself. And that was the purpose for years of my training.
Can I ask, do you think, was it that you really wanted to be the athlete and therefore everything else fell to the wayside? Or was it by being the athlete, you didn't have to address the other things? You know, was the athlete a cover up for the other stuff, do you think?
I think so, because I think me and you have had those conversations where being an athlete isn't actually that important to me. I think it was who was good at it, and people said, oh, Al, you should compete. You should do this, you should do that. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. But it definitely then allowed me to not address certain things just because I could roll on the fact that I was a good athlete and people respected me for being a good athlete versus actually I've got a load of shit that I need to be working on, which is more important than being a good athlete.
And I've seen your evolution so much, especially over the last probably couple years, where you started to acknowledge perhaps what your drivers were as to why you would be an athlete. And I think it was always interesting seeing you and Ant, you know, in the same gym, training at one point for the same goal, which was essentially to get to the regional level and potentially beyond. And you know, you would clearly say that like your objective, your mission was just to beat Ant. Yeah. And Ant's mission was always beyond that. It was like, I actually want to get to CrossFit Games. I don't care how I get there. Yeah. And I think the more and more you started to say it, the more and more you started to question, why am I doing this? Yeah. Because what you'd always find is that, when at least what I observed was that you would beat Ant in the CrossFit Open, and that it kind of felt like your job was done because you're like, well, I've done what I set out to do. Yeah. And then you'd kind of move on to the next stage of competition, and then you'd always feel like, I'd always just be like, just looks like Al doesn't really give a shit anymore. He's like, it feels like he's done his CrossFit Games by beating Ant in the Open, and he's kind of done.
But even before Ant, I wanted to be fittest in Kuwait. When I left Kuwait, I wanted to be fittest in Hong Kong. So it was like, I guess I used those crutches to actually not really understand the reason why I was training. And I think the reason why I was training is I actually love being social. I love being around people, and I love pushing myself in a group, which is why I started CrossFit. And it completely changed. Like my goals changed in CrossFit from where I started to like what I actually enjoy about training. I got lost in the mid part of that for sure.
I feel like that happened to like all of us.
Everybody.
In that phase. Like we all started CrossFit because we thought it was like fun, it was varied, it was challenging, you know, like you were learning all these new skills. And at some point there was always the question, and this was like, you know, I made the mistake as a gym owner as well. You know, you'd see someone come into your gym who showed a bit of talent.
Yeah.
Who was just there to get healthy and just train and move.
You're an athlete.
Yeah, and it'd be like, hey, we're going to take you out of the group class and put you on an individual program because I think you have really real talent in the sport. And you know, to be fair to that person, they were like, shit, that's not why I actually came here. But if the coach is telling me this is what I've got to do, maybe this is just what everyone does. And to be honest, when that person would look around them, everyone else who had quote unquote talent were also on individualized programs or doing extras or, you know, signing up to competitions and doing them. We all got lost a little bit, and I definitely got lost in it as well.
I think that's when you look back at CrossFit, it went from the part where CrossFit was designed to bring people together. CrossFit was designed as a community sport where you have a gym and people come in for the 6 o'clock class and they know everybody by name. They fist bump everybody. You all write your scores on the whiteboard at the end of class so everybody knows what score you got and that sort of stuff. And it completely changed to everybody, if you want to be good, you have to be on an individualized program. That was just the standard.
And I think this is what Greg Glassman's beef with Dave Castro was essentially what Glassman had set it out to be, was a training methodology for health.
Yeah.
Dave Castro, you know, with the creation of the CrossFit Games and the glorification of the CrossFit Games, that was the CrossFit Games was amazing for the methodology because it created heroes and it created aspiration and inspiration and created a much bigger following. But what it did was take away from the initial objective of CrossFit, which was like get up, be in a community, and start moving.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's the forever the thing that hurts CrossFit is this confusion between the sport and the methodology.
Yeah.
And I think that's something they're still really trying to work on, how to create that separation and the difference between the two. And now we're seeing like CrossFit training being something that kind of its own Instagram, its own entity. And then you've got CrossFit Games as its own profile, but it's still confusing. It's still not clear cut yet.
Yeah. When you look at it as an outsider, and I mean, even when I speak to my mum about, like, I've been doing CrossFit for years now. It's all I've done. And like when my mum talks about CrossFit, she still talks about like the gyms and that sort of stuff. But actually, when you look at the bigger picture, there's so much more going on in CrossFit that I think people are just confused because there's so much going on. There's like different messages. Am I meant to be doing fitness in 100 words? Am I meant to be doing an individualized program? Like what is the right and wrong way to do it, you know?
Yeah. Let's rewind back to your story.
Yeah.
Okay, so because I just would love hearing people's stories, especially around training and fitness and CrossFit. So, okay, you're going through university. You're following Jordan's program, the Warrior program. You're doing a savage amount of training at the same time. You're doing some coaching as well.
Yeah.
Can I ask, what was your programming that you were delivering to your clients in your garage gym?
Yeah, it was exactly the same.
Oh my God.
Exactly the same.
So they were doing Murph, rest an hour Murph.
Well, not to that degree, but like it was like the goal of training in those days was to like smash yourself. Like, which is why actually when I look at my training, like, I mean, you know, like I'll bin myself for the sake of binning myself. Like I'll be throwing up in round 2 of a 6-round workout just because like that's what we used to do. Like I remember my first ever CrossFit workout was Fight Gone Bad and I chunded. My second workout was this and I chunded. It was just like
that was to a point where if you're not chundering,
it's not a good workout.
It's not a good workout.
Yeah, and that was my mindset for training other people as well when we first started.
It's like I think about that all the time. I think we were just having a conversation about this the other day with one of our affiliate owners who we were going through a deload. We had a deload a few weeks ago and he was saying he struggled with the deload. And when I asked him more questions, started to dig into it a little bit, you know, even him who's been in CrossFit, probably in CrossFit space for a few years now, has still got that association between the effectiveness of a workout is dictated by how hard you push.
Yeah.
And when we go back to like why we move or why we train, movement and training doesn't always have to be hard. Like
No.
what we're actually doing, we're setting ourselves, we're exploring our bodies, we're seeing what we can do with. There are some workouts in a week, there's some movement that should be hard. There's got to be equally the amount of movement that should be easy and sustainable and moderate. But it's, that is still very much the CrossFit way of thinking, is that a good workout is determined by how hard it is.
And that's something that I've definitely, and I'm sure you've kind of seen that as well, is that's something I have put effort into, of trying to change that mindset in it. It's like a very destructive way to look at training, like just on anything. I'm going to try to lift the heaviest weight. I'm going to try to go as fast as I can on this. And it's just, it comes at a cost to everything else in life. Like, when you have a hard training week, you're not a good boyfriend.
You're hard training day, you can't do anything else.
You
days.
You can't do anything. When that's everything from relationships to personal care to the mental health, and all of this stuff comes at the wayside of being able to full send an open workout. And it's like, at some point, the other shit's more important than what's going on in the gym.
Yeah. Can I go back to the clients that you're coaching at uni?
Yeah.
Or your mates, I guess.
Yeah,
the cult that formulated in your garage. Them following your program, because I'm guessing that they weren't as capable of an athlete as you were. I'm guessing there was hopefully some scaling involved.
Yeah.
What you're giving them. But were they successful? Like, were they seeing progress? Did they break? Yeah. Did they continue with CrossFit after you?
Yeah.
What was
it's actually quite cool. Yeah, it's quite cool. A lot of them, so there was I'd say like a group of 12 to 15 of us that I would train through the week. A couple of them have gone on to be CrossFit coaches. Do you know Form in Leeds?
No.
So it's a big gym in Leeds. One of them's coaching there. The other one's done a few things at Blackfriars and a few other places around London and that sort of stuff. So they've stayed doing CrossFit, and I'm actually I stayed in touch with them, and if they need anything, I am there if they need to. That's but cool. It's kind of cool that I was the spark to them doing, and they're coaching now. That's their full-time gig. So it's cool that I had the capacity to do that at uni. But yeah, there was definitely some points where I programmed something. I was like, yeah, they're fucked. That's not good.
And to be honest, at that point in time, when you reflect back, were you looking at your program being like, maybe this isn't the most effective?
Well, it was like a conflict of interest for me, because I was also studying sport at uni. So I did sport and sociology combo. And there was parts of that we had to do, like gym inductions and how to program for that sort of stuff. And I was just in the classes just being like, well, this isn't what I do. And I'm the fittest person in this room. There's nobody in this room stronger than me. So how can you tell me that working at sub-maximal percentages is good for me? I'm going to go max out. And it was uni was a bit of an interesting journey in terms of actually accepting parts of that. And then definitely when I went out to Kuwait, I had a bit of a, not realization, but I had to put more effort in things, because I had a lot of holes in my game that I had to then research how to get better. Things like strict pulling, strict pushing. There was some holes with aerobic stuff. There was holes in my game that I was
as an athlete
that I'm not getting better at, but I'm putting in hours and hours and hours trying to get better. There has to be a more efficient way to do this.
Okay, so after uni,
you
pretty much moved to Kuwait.
Day of, basically. I never graduated from uni. I never went to the throw your hat in the air and do the picture kind. I finished uni, and then you graduate 2 months later. But went to uni and then went straight into training for regionals in Copenhagen. I went to Copenhagen, and then 4 or 5 days after Copenhagen, flew out to Kuwait.
What program are you following at this time? You still on the Warrior program?
Still on Warrior. The first year of being the first year of me being in Kuwait, I was on Warrior programming, and then moved on to Icon.
So tell us about that switch. I mean, well, firstly, what are the biggest differences to your life now?
Yeah,
finishing university and moving to Kuwait.
I'm now a full-time athlete. That's all I'm thinking about.
But were you employed as a full-time athlete?
No. Honestly, the amount of work I did, and sorry Circuit Plus for anybody that's going to be listening, the amount of work I did for Circuit Plus and the amount of money I got paid was absolutely diabolical. Absolutely ridiculous. I've always been a good coach. I've always cared when I'm on the coaching floor, but as soon as that hour clocked out, I had my shirt off and I was training. And that's all I did for 4 to 6 hours a day. Every day.
And what was the goal at this point?
To make regionals. And I knew going to Kuwait that what was the region at the time? Africa.
You were in Africa, yeah.
Africa was a challenging region.
No, you were Asia.
Asia, maybe the first year. Then it moved to Africa.
Yeah.
But I knew it would be challenging because there was loads of.
No, you were Africa. Sorry, your first year was Africa.
There was like Ioannakowski. There was loads of people out there that were good athletes. But I knew.
I think there was loads of people like you, great athletes.
Yeah.
Who'd been
Andre
hired,
was out there. Hudet was out there.
Who'd been hired to be coaches essentially.
And that's just what the Middle East did for a long period of time. Is they would just hire good athletes to go out and do coaching.
And can I ask you at that point in time, like, why did you want to get back to regionals? Or why did you want to go to regionals?
I think it just defined who I was. I think I was so caught up in CrossFit is me, and I've done it for, at that point, I was 22. So I'd already been doing CrossFit for 6 years. And that's all I'd done, you know? So it like defined me as a human of how good I was at CrossFit. And I wasn't good at anything else, you know? Like
that was kind of the label that you gave
yourself. I created myself, yeah. And that was I guess that was like the defining moment was me making regionals. That was like all I'd wanted to do. And then when I made regionals, I was like, it's pretty shit. There's nothing going on here.
Tell me about that.
It was just, so I made regionals, trained my ass off. I think I actually came second in the region. Phil Hesketh, I think, won. I came second that year at through the Africa region or whatever it was. And that was like, I was like, oh, fuck, I've made it. Like, I've beaten...
Top 10 went?
Yeah, top 10 went. And I'd beaten like 5 games athletes. And I was like, look at me.
Yeah.
Like, this is...
You're the new kid in the block in Kuwait.
Like, hungry. Yeah, I mean, you know me to a degree. Like, when I was competing, I was like, bit of a savage, you know, like, and that was...
Well, you have to be honest.
Yeah. And that was my mindset for everything. So once I'd got through the Open, I'd done well. I'd kind of pumped up my sails to be like, I'm going to go to regionals and make a splash. I got to regionals and bombed.
Can I ask what were the tests that year?
Can you remember the assault run, handstand, push up? The first year I made regionals was the dumbbells. Yeah, when it was just one. Dumbbell regional.
Oh, that
was obviously shit for me.
The barbell specialist.
Yeah.
But other than the workouts, because I mean you're still not bad at workouts. There was a lot of strict movements, I guess. That's probably something that you hadn't done a whole lot of. And we've obviously done a lot of digging into your training and looking at you now. Your strict capacity, having done so much more work, you've just kind of almost had those like newbie gains, where you just getting so much better so quickly.
Yeah, can do 50 unbroken pull-ups, but can't do one strict.
But reflecting back on, you know, making it to that regionals and getting into the regionals and competing, like, what was your headspace then? Like, how hungry were you when you actually got to regionals, or like when you came to Hong Kong, did you feel like you'd already won by getting there?
I think that was definitely my mindset in terms of like. I pushed way harder in the Open than what I did at the regionals. And I think as well, when I look back, I never tapered. I never took a deload. I finished the Open and did Murph the day after or whatever, you know, like did savage workouts straight after. So I think, one, I wasn't educated enough on how to be successful as an athlete. So I think I hit regionals hungry, for sure, wanted to go there and cause a splash, but just didn't have anything in the tank to be able to perform.
And at this point, you're in the Icon program?
Yeah.
So can I ask why did you swap from Warrior to Icon? So Icon is Chris Spealer's program.
Yeah.
Why did you make that swap?
I went out to Barcelona to do the CrossFit competitors course.
Great city, by the way.
Yeah,
I've said that on this podcast probably 100 times.
Yeah, it's such a cool place. I was out there for about 2 weeks, paid by Circuit Plus.
So good.
Such a sick life.
Yeah.
But
sorry for the disappointment of Coastal in the process.
Well, that money's a little bit different, lad. Went out and did the competitors course, and me being one of the only people there that spoke English, so like it was a Spanish ran course. I had no idea about that. You signed up to
the Spanish one.
Yeah.
Nice.
But they had a translator there. And just because there was a couple of us that spoke English, the Chris Spieler, Matt Chan, and what was the other guy that used to do it? He was terrible at CrossFit as well.
Why would they get Chris Spieler and Matt Chan to teach on a Spanish course?
Well, no, it was the competitors course, so it was translated into Spanish. They did like a European tour.
So you were actually fine?
Yeah, I was actually fine. I didn't sign up for the Spanish one, but we went out and we had drinks and had food and stuff, and it was just like a instant connection in terms of like, this guy's cool. He's a legend in the sport. He's a hero of the sport. And it was like, now I feel like I pulled a little bit more information from him than what I would from Warrior programming at the time. I never lost contact with Jordan. He still would give me programming. We'd still talk about stuff, but it was just, when you followed something for so many years, a fresh perspective on the sport, the training was needed. And that's then what got me to regionals again. And then when I came out here, I was still on Icon.
What was the process like essentially breaking up with your mate who's kind of been doing your programming for all those years? Like, was there any animosity? Was it a hard thing to do? Was it easy? Was he understanding?
Yeah, it was an easy, it wasn't a hard like breakup. It was
because it is kind of a breakup. I remember breaking up with my coach and it was horrible.
Yeah, I guess there was definitely like some guilt of like why I'm doing it, but at the time I did explain like, look, I do want just a fresh perspective on training. You like, you feel it when you've been doing the same program for 4 years, 5 years, the same coaching cues, the same perspective on fitness. It definitely it does help to refresh things if the coach isn't doing that for you or helping you with that.
I guess you just know sometimes.
Yeah.
You just know. So what was it like moving from, being on the same program, the Warrior program for so long, to now moving to a brand new program? And what did you love and what did you maybe not love so much about the Icon program?
Well, Chris is a gymnastic, like he's sick at gymnastics. So that was one of my main reasons, is I was already pretty elite at the weightlifting aspect and I needed help with things like chest to bars, toes to bar, rope climbs. Obviously didn't work on that very well, but strict gymnastics, handstand push-ups, that's where my flaws were, and aerobic stuff. And he was good at both of those. So it was like, okay, I can pull as much information as I can from Chris in those elements or in those like parts of the sport.
Was it an individualized program? Was it a group program? Because I was never really sure.
Semi.
Seemed like a semi. So
Because the Icon program itself is not individualized, but Chris would basically program for me through Icon.
And did you improve? Did you get better on the Icon program?
For sure. I think if you look at the athlete I was in Kuwait and then the athlete I was when I first moved here, my first year here, I think probably the fittest I've ever been was my first year here, which I was still on Icon at that time, but also doing your stuff and stuff.
You kind of just jumping in, doing everything.
Yeah.
But I think that was one thing I observed straight away, was like, this guy is good enough to be able to almost jump in anything. And I think as time went on, we started to discover a few holes in your game. But at that point, you were kind of still thriving and you're good enough to just be bouncing around.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Okay, so how long were you an Icon?
Last 2 years at Kuwait, first year here, 3 years.
I can't remember why. Why did you stop Icon? Why did you part ways?
We went out to ACC.
That's it. Asia CrossFit Championships.
And that was really
that was the first iteration of sanctioned. The sanctionals.
Yes.
Yeah. When we basically regionals, the first year of no regionals, and it was the year of the national champs of CrossFit Games. Yeah. And that Ant had already booked his spot to the games by winning China in the Open. Yeah, and I think Ant came third in that one. So sorry, continue.
And I think that was like,
because he was there, wasn't he? Yeah,
yeah. And me and him got on well. We went out for dinner. I had a great relationship with him out there. But it was just kind of, for me, I knew I was done competing after that competition.
Why?
I just didn't have the want, didn't have the fire, didn't really want to hurt on the floor, like, just didn't really. There was definitely a change in my mindset when I left that competition of just like, I don't really want to do this anymore. Like, it's taken up too much of my life. Also having relationship issues and that sort of stuff going on, which I think, again, at this sort of point, I was like, there's so much more going on in my life that I need to focus on. And being an athlete takes up 99.9% of my day-to-day activity, you know?
So where did you go from there?
LPC.
But I think you kind of went through a transitional period where you basically
LPC and 15 other things.
I feel like you went from training, following the Icon program, training multiple times a day, putting yourself in the bin most sessions. You competed in ACC, And then you kind of went to like, you were jumping in some of Ant's sessions, joining in a lot of my sessions, I remember, because Kyle was programming for me at the time. You kind of gone to like 1 a days rather than 2 a days.
Yeah. I would say it was definitely the last year, I'd say I think because CrossFit's all I've known, when I don't train CrossFit, there's just something about it feels inherently weird. And I think I've just had to get comfortable and more accepting of the things that are good for me versus binning myself. And that's taken a process of learning, one, of my body and what's actually good for it, versus a mindset of if it's not hard, it's not doing me any good.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I never did bodybuilding. I thought bodybuilding was like what weirdos did. I was a CrossFitter. Why would you do bodybuilding? Why would I do structured strength training unless it was a back squat program where I was doing Bulgarian volume training 3 times a week, or a 20 rep max back squat? Like, my mindset towards training has changed massively from trying to hurt myself, and that was what was a good training program, is how much it hurt and how much that was the degree of success, to now actually doing the stuff that is good for my body to be able to train 10 years. 15 years.
I remember it was interesting because we always run PD sessions here every week. We always have done pretty much since you arrived.
Yeah.
And I remember I would often pick one member of staff and we'd use that staff as a case study. So I'd basically ask the team, right, who's broken right now, or who's got an issue that they're dealing with, and who would like to be a case study. So I remember, like, we used to have Jacques. He would be someone, and then I can't remember, we had the other coaches. And then I remember you just saying, like, I'd actually like to be a case study because I think there's a few things I'd like to work on. And so we started to kind of put you into the circle, and we were like, and I found it quite fascinating because I was like, this guy can lift a silly amount of weight. He's extremely explosive. He can do a double dumbbell overhead squat. So he's like got fantastic levels of mobility, but there are certain things he just couldn't do. I remember anything where there had to be tempo. Like if I ever asked you to go control 3-second eccentric, you genuinely couldn't do it. You had really poor kind of mind-muscle connection, I would say. So if we would ask you to engage your lat, you wouldn't know how to.
A trap goes.
Yeah, we'd ask you to do a row, you wouldn't know how to. It would go, straight to your trap. So it was like, it was so interesting because on the outside, you've got this guy who's extremely fit, extremely strong, extremely mobile, jacked out of your mind, ripped, like 10% body fat, if not less. Yeah, there was like really basic body control things that you would kind of expect a beginner to be able to do that you couldn't do.
Yeah.
And I remember you finding it fascinating. Yeah. And I remember you being like, how can't I do this? But at the same time, I could also see that you were getting quite frustrated. Of
course. I mean,
and it was like, how can I not do this? And I remember almost a part of you being kind of dismissing it, being like, it's not important because look, at the end of the day, like
I'm still the fittest person.
I can still snatch twice your weight.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's an ego thing for sure. But I think when you're wrapped up in identity of like CrossFit and being a CrossFitter is what defines me, and anything outside of that circle isn't worth my time because within the circle I'm the top dog, then it becomes very easy to not justify taking an interest in that sort of stuff. And I think there was definitely a realization process that if I wanted to compete, or if I wanted to be stronger or fitter, or whatever the parameters of what I deemed successful, I had to do things outside of what I was currently doing, because I was already the strongest. I was already the best at sub 5-minute workouts, 10-minute workouts. What I wasn't good at was, like you said, all those things. But for years, I just didn't do them.
But at what point did your training go from like just trying to be really fit to, because you use these words like being healthy?
Yeah.
When did that change?
When I stopped competing, because I started to try to look after myself more in terms of like some days I couldn't get out of bed. Like I had no sex drive, couldn't get out of bed. My knees hurt, my elbows hurt. I'm 26.
We were just chatting about, remember how much coffee you used to drink?
Yeah, I used to drink 15 coffees a day.
Like
genuinely.
You wouldn't actually drink water.
Yeah, I wouldn't drink any water, and I wouldn't eat till 8 p.m.
Yeah, and I would be seeing you be about to coach the 6 p.m. class. You'd just be by the Nespresso machine, just slamming shots of coffee.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, I'm resilient, so it works for a period of time. But I think a lot of the reflecting I did was I don't want to be one broken, and I don't want to be not able to do the things that I love, which is I started training at 16 because I loved it. I fell in love with training because of the group mentality. The workouts were challenging, they were fun, all the stuff we've talked about, but I lost the love for that at some point, and it became more about how that defines me as a human. And I've now
which was the athlete
side of things, and I think I've now tipped over the other side of like, actually, I want to be able to snatch when I'm 50. I want to be able to like still be in good nick. I still want to feel good when I take my shirt off at the beach. Don't want to be sub 10% body fat, but the health parameters for me have changed over the years in comparison to what they were when I was younger.
I remember when I used to, when we'd have conversations around maybe some of the things that I was observing you doing, and I was kind of asking you how you were feeling. I remember at the time you would say, I feel great. Yeah. And I'd say, like, how's your sleep? And you'd be like, my sleep's fine. My sleep's good. Now, when you look back and you reflect on those days, now that you're in a position now where I would say that, you prioritize health and feeling good a lot more than, living like an athlete like you used to.
Yeah.
When looking back now, do you think you did feel good?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think that was, again, it's coming from like my old man, showing weakness was never an option. And I think that was the thing of like, when you asked me how you're doing, the only answer I had was yes. Even if my knees were falling off and I had a herniated disc, like I'd still be like, yeah, I'm doing fine. Let's snatch.
Yeah.
And I think when you look back, there was just so many red lights and warning signs that not that I got injured, because I haven't really been injured. I hurt my elbow a few years ago, but it's not like I've been plagued with injuries. I just think health-wise and lifestyle and mental health were the biggest, that took the toll the biggest rather than my body.
I think you were getting close. Yeah. I think if you'd continued that journey for maybe another 1 to 2 years, because you were also, another thing to also understand is that when you moved to Hong Kong, you were still pursuing the life of an athlete, but like I was making you work pretty fucking hard.
Yeah.
So rather than just having a coach 2 hours a day and train all day, you actually now having a coach 5, 6, 7 hours a day,
and education stuff, like all the stuff we do. Yeah.
So I think your cup just started to fill up more and more, and I was starting to see niggles and little injuries coming in. When you would come in and say how you were feeling, and I think you made a change at the right time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I look at it now, and my training I've done this year is the least training I've done, volume, but
by a long way. But my strength numbers haven't gone down, really. My actual fitness capacity hasn't gone down that much. I'm just being... Your ability to suffer has gone down, but I think that's all of us, because we just don't want to suffer
anymore. I just don't want to do it anymore, yeah.
Can I ask now, because I never actually asked you, because, now we pretty much all train together.
Yeah.
And we pretty much all follow the Live, Perform, Compete program. Or the Compete program is what we follow. Like, what do you like about the Compete program, and like, why are you sticking with it?
I think it's the opposite of what I've done for so long, that I actually like seeing progress from week to week. So right now on a Monday, we're doing squat cleans, and I've seen the progression of the positions and the weight over the 6 week, 8 week, whatever the block is. On a Wednesday, we're snatching, we're doing speed work, strength speed work, and I've seen the progressions. Whereas when it's randomized, you're guessing at what your ability is. Whereas now it's a lot more quantifiable, which is what I like.
And that's probably quite a different approach, though.
It is,
isn't it? Like, what was it? Because I remember when you first arrived and you started jumping into sessions, you had actually quite a bit of resistance against the whole idea of like the structured and having 6 to 8 week cycles and having clear intentions and like focusing on these 3 or 4 things and everything kind of going to maintenance mode. You did have I know, because it was very different to what you'd done. So like, how have you come to the point now where like you value it?
Just by the way I feel, like I'm not walking around beat up. I'm not walking around with no energy, having to synthetically have energy within my system. I have a lot healthier relationship with food. I have a much healthier relationship with Izzy. I've got a much healthier relationship with life in general, with myself, with friends, with family, with all that sort of stuff. Whereas all of that stuff just got put on the back burner because of being an athlete was the biggest priority. And now I can still be an athlete. When I come in, I still want to train. I still want to lift heavy. I still want to full send on a weekend if I want to. And that doesn't come to the sacrifice of everything else in my life.
Nice. This is supporting everything else in life,
Exactly.
not taking away from it.
I think you posted about that today.
Yeah, I did just post about it today. I was actually having a conversation with one of our old coaches, Sad, who's now over in Dubai, and I was just checking in on him, and I'd noticed some of his notes on his on the workout he just entered yesterday, and he just said, I think his note from it was muscle up work, and he said, oh, elbows were a bit sore. It was handstand push up work, and he said these just felt way harder than normal. And so I just asked a question. I said, seeing your notes on your muscle ups and your strict handstand push ups, do you think maybe you might be burning out and maybe need to pull back a little bit? And he messaged back and said, like, that's exactly what I need. Basically, like, he'd realized that he hadn't even read his own notes, didn't have the self-awareness. Yeah. And this happens to us all the time. Sometimes you just need someone else to call you out.
To say exactly the same thing the 15th time, and
because you have a hunch, don't you? Like, he knows he has a hunch, but he kind of, like we do, like we always want to try it. Yeah. You got to try ride the line. If I survive this session, then maybe it wasn't so bad. Yeah. If I break, then I know I should have probably taken a break.
But the goal is to have the self-awareness to not break. Yes. Right. Yeah, and that's the thing is, I don't think you could have told me 15 times that I needed to do more structural balance work. I need to be able to do this or that. But I mean, anybody that knows me knows that if you tell me to do something, I'm not going to do it.
You're just not at the right place in your life to be hearing that. Yeah.
But now reflecting back, it's definitely apparent that was the case.
Can I ask, do you think you'll see competition come back as to something you want to do again?
Nah. I think for me, like, I'll always do the open, try to, but I think I'll always be involved with some degree of competition. But like in terms of like dialing everything in for it to be my sole purpose, no, I have gone too far. I love my life right now. Like, I'm happy. I'm in a good place. Got good friends. I can still have a beer at the weekend. I can still eat what I want to. I can still come in and train with you guys and like have a good time doing that. But the difference is it's just not the main priority. And if I'm going to compete, I know my ego is going to want me to be competitive.
Well, actually, just on that last bit, because I think you've actually just put a label on yourself again, because actually something you just said recently was that you're going to do the summer throwdown this year, but you've got a new goal for yourself. Yeah. What is that goal?
Well, so exactly that. I've now moved away from my relationship with CrossFit was you finish the open, where you finished, and that dictates how successful you are in life. Finish third, finish fifth. Did this, won that.
Lost to
Ed in the thrust of work. But that shouldn't be what dictates you. And I think a workout for me was successful by whether I won or whether I lost. And right now, I want to get better at competing, just being able to put the competitor's hat on, but create parameters for me to be successful. So like for the summer throwdown, I want to be able to do this, and this within the workout, regardless of anybody else. But that's something you have to practice, and I'm not going to be able to get better at that unless I set those goals and do that myself.
Yeah, it's a fun way of competing because it really takes the pressure off. It's really just you against you. Yeah, I do, because obviously I went from one end of the spectrum, which is being super competitive and just wanting to try and beat everyone, to then becoming such a nerd and such a geek with like the strategy and pacing and like really priding myself on that. Yeah, that I probably went too far down the other side, where I'd be like, people be like, what are you doing? Why are you going so unbelievably slow and you're not even tired? I'd be like, oh, it's a strategy.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm throwing up in the corner.
Exactly. And had finished 10 minutes before me. Yeah. But I mean, like, generally speaking, like when I think about longevity and sustainability, like we want to be undercooking our workouts versus overcooking them. Yeah. We want to spend 90% of our time working sub-maximally, and every now and then, re-establish where those thresholds are. Yeah. But certainly shouldn't be the other way around.
Yeah. Nobody likes a well-cooked steak.
Nice, lad.
Yeah.
Al, thank you very much for your time, for sharing your story, my friend.
Been a pleasure, Teddy.
And until next time.
Yeah.